When you've had more than 3 adverse childhood events, or very significant ones like I had, like you had,
for sure.
On average, there's a 20-year reduction in lifespan. I was basically in a wheelchair. I came across this scientist in Australia. He ended up basically healing me. I wanted to create a home wellness system that could work out how people like me could get better from home.
Harry Massey spent years searching for why the body breaks down and how it heals itself. Today, he's a world leader in bioenergetics, the study of energy and living systems. He's built groundbreaking technologies that read and correct the body's information field to help people rebuild health, strength, and purpose.
You said you can do it digitally, and it's wearable.
It'll increase the efficiency of energy in the cell by 22%.
The is turning on or off more than 1,000 genes, and yet a 22% shift in efficiency of converting sugar into electricity or heat just by wearing the...
Correct.
You're listening to The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey.
So you spent 7 years in bed. What's that like?
It's pretty shocking, honestly, and extremely traumatic, and you lose all of your friends. You half the time don't even know what you're thinking. Pretty much it's like living in a big, dark, black cloud.
Why did you spend that much time in bed?
So I had these 3 very traumatic experiences when I was 21. The first, I fell ice climbing off Ben Nevis, and ice is very, very brittle. I was ice climbing up, fell, hit a very steep snow slope, fractured my spine. Didn't know I'd fractured my spine at the time, so I just carried on, as you do when you're 21. A few months later, I went out to the French Alps, was doing more climbing. That time I got a fever and basically got a viral infection, which turned out to be sort of to give me post-viral fatigue later. And then the third thing that happened at the same time was a very traumatic emotional thing, but I came out as being gay at my 21st, but I didn't come out in the normal sense. The boyfriend I had at the time, he wasn't really my boyfriend, turned up uninvited, outed me to all my parents, godparents, family, about 120 people. And after that, my parents, for a time, rejected me and said how important it was to be, have a normal life. And I could only be a barman or work in the theatre. So in that last year of university, I went into a bit of a cycle of taking lots of drugs and escapism.
Holy crap. So you had massive physical injury, which causes inflammation. You had a viral thing, which causes inflammation, fatigue, all that stuff. You had massive emotional trauma, which causes inflammation, fatigue. And then you stack some drug use on top of that, which isn't always bad, but in the way you were doing it probably wasn't great.
Well, it is when you go out on a Friday night, take lots of ecstasy and amphetamine and keep going all throughout the weekend, and then by Monday morning collapse. And when you do that for about 6 months in a row, you're totally toast.
So you toasted yourself in every which way. Okay. And then you ended up in bed.
Well, I actually ended up in a wheelchair first because I didn't know what to do with myself. So after university and being fired from my first job, went back out to the Alps, tried to heal myself with all this fresh air and good French food.
Did it work?
Totally not. I got so exhausted. I ended up going back home, didn't know what to do, so I worked because I'd already been fired. So I thought I'd enroll in an MBA, which, well, you've been through an MBA. That was so hard I had to stretch it out over 2 years. And in the final year, I was basically in a wheelchair. I did pass through a miracle, but I did do all my exams in a wheelchair. Then after that, I was just totally bedbound back at my parents' house.
So I guess they took you back at that point?
They did take me back because I think they had no choice and obviously realized I was in a very bad state.
Wow. So what did the doctors tell you was wrong with you?
So in England, there's no real functional medicine, or there wasn't back 30 years ago. So I was under the National Health Service, and the statistics, well, they basically don't even believe. They call it yuppie flu. They didn't necessarily know the right blood tests. So they said I was fine, although after 2 years of doing blood tests, they said, oh, well, there is something wrong. But they didn't know
and
what.
You got to wait 2 years to get your first basic blood test anyway, because it was the...
Well, yes, and I was 21, so I didn't have any money to do anything. And my parents were obviously, they didn't know anything about holistic health or alternative health. So it took that length of time for me to give up on the conventional system, then start seeing nutritionists. I saw nutritionists for like 2-3 years, I wouldn't say every type of diet, 'cause not every type of diet existed, but like the macrobiotic ones. And I did the whole vegan fasting thing.
I bet you that wasn't so good.
That definitely didn't work. But at that point, I tried everything for about a year and a half to see what results it would get. And then I would change tactic. And yeah, after about 6 years of changing all these different tactics, I sort of came to the conclusion that I wasn't really studying where energy came from, because every book on chronic fatigue, it's like, well, you have to get rid of the, Epstein bar, or you're toxic, and, you're meant to take all of these pills to get rid of things. Right. And I just thought, like, actually, why don't I study where energy comes from a positive state instead? And it was that mind shift that got me into the whole space of energy medicine - bioenergetics. But in short, I wanted to study where energy actually came from.
We've had very similar paths. I had chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. I didn't end up in a wheelchair or bedridden, but I'm pretty wrecked. And I also got to that point, like, I want to know where energy comes from. I decided mitochondria. What did you decide energy comes from?
That point, I was reading all these books about subtle energy, and I was more thinking about, well, what on earth is controlling energy in the body? And I came across this scientist in Australia, and he'd been mapping out the energy and information fields of the human body. I rang him up and I said, well, actually, a couple of things. I also had this strange idea that I wanted to create a home wellness system that could work out how people like me could get better from home, because I couldn't travel to doctors. I couldn't actually drive a car at the time. And he liked that idea, and he ended up agreeing to meet. So I flew from England to Los Angeles. He flew from Australia to Los Angeles, spent 10 days together, and he actually started giving me what we now call an infoceutical that will basically imprint information back into the body. And, well, in very short story, no, it's a very long story short, he ended up basically healing me.
Now, I've probably been the most skeptical of homeopathics, or just this whole idea of energy and water, for a long time. And then over the course of building the biohacking movement and working with some of the people I respect the very most, one of them was a Johns Hopkins ENT surgeon. So Johns Hopkins surgeons are kind of a big deal. At least I think they are. But he had left his surgical practice because he said, my patients don't get better. They come back 2 years later with the same problems. And ended up having a whole set of homeopathic things. And I spent a lot of time with him in his office. And he said, look, my biggest problem is I never see a patient more than twice, because they always get better. Their allergies go away. Like, their stuff gets fixed. And so I see him in the grocery store, and then I hear that it worked. And then he said, Dave, you're weird, because I've never had someone come in this number of times and not get better. And so he was the guy who first figured out this is a mold thing. And it was multifactorial. So that was the first time, like, someone I really respect who has done all the Western stuff, who ended up at homeopathy as part of his very broad set of tools, that just made me reconsider it. And since that time, I've worked with guys like Dietrich Klinghardt, who are using lasers, and we're using lasers to program stem cells. So there's very clearly something happening with water, which does store information. There's all this stuff about crystals and water and all. So I don't have a problem with it now. But I also don't like the idea of having to have like a big rack of water to, drops of this and drops of that. It's just too much work. So you said you can do it digitally. Can you just email me an infoceutical?
I mean, it wouldn't be very convenient to email an infoceutical. I mean, the way
spam filter.
No, I mean, the way we've been thinking about that is actually it's best done through a wearable. And so actually, I took these infoceutical That was 24 years ago I first started taking them, and obviously you have to take the top off, add them to water, all of that. So it's much better to do it through a wearable, and then and the great advantage of that is you can get the right infoceutical also at the right time of day, because, that there is timing. Like if you want to relax and rest, you want that signal at night. If you want to obviously wake up in the morning, you want that signal in the morning. There's a whole Chinese medicine clock. So every 2 hours it changes, which is the best information for each meridian. So actually a wearable is a way better way to deliver it.
A lot of people have heard of the circadian rhythm, and we think it's a 24-hour cycle. But German medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic has very complex circadian clocks for every different organ in the body. So totally lines up. You talked about doing this at home. So if someone is listening to the show right now and they're bedridden or they just feel like crap all the time, the way that we both did, how would you go about diagnosing this using digital technologies or using these, I'm just say, esoteric principles?
So for us, it's a combination of using some Chinese esoteric principles with modern physics, but also actually modern blood labs. So what our wearable will do in the app is it'll look at your face, and your face contains information from a Chinese medicine perspective. I'll stick out my tongue. But your tongue also contains information, like where it's inflamed in different areas of the tongue, that contains information. Your voice contains information. But just from the pure wearable perspective, if I read your pulse, I would just put 3 fingers here, and I could basically feel the quality of 29 different pulses. So we mapped out those pulses just using a PPG sensor. So the wearable will basically classify it into those 29 pulses, and that gives us really good information about your emotional characteristics, but also organ characteristics. And when you combine all of that, and you can also upload your blood lab data, and it'll correlate between Chinese and functional medicine as well.
That's really cool. The first time I heard about this was 2004. I was in Tibet and I would see a Tibetan doctor, and same thing, 3 fingers on the pulse and doing all this stuff. It's not about beats per minute. It's about the quality of the pulse, kind of like what an EKG does, but even more sensitive. And so you've mapped this out using a digital sensor. So then you're using, actually multiple lineages use the quality of the pulse. So you're measuring that digitally, putting in through an AI system?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically all based on the shape of a pulse. So I don't know if the screen, a normal pulse looks like that. Wiry pulse has this sort of jagged edge. But yeah, in short, it's the shape that we can classify.
Okay, and that's going to say what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Does it correlate well with Western labs?
Different aspects do. So yes, like someone with low thyroid, something like that. You can see that in your tongue. You can see it in the shape of your pulse. But yes, you can see correlations.
Wow. And how well correlated is it? I mean, have you published studies? Are there studies saying this pulse equals thyroid?
I'm going to explain it a little bit differently. Okay. So from a Chinese medicine perspective, they never had blood tests in the first place. Right. So I'll just give you an example of what these pulses mean. So if you looked at a wiry pulse is correlated to stagnant qi in the liver. And then when you look at the liver, you can then make a correlation between the different emotional characteristics. So someone who's frustrated or angry will show up in the liver. Or if we take a soggy pulse, that's correlated to spleen. That's also correlated to anxiety, and the positive side of that would be faith. So it's more like you can make these correlations between different organ systems. It's like less so with blood labs.
Okay, so it's more correlated with psychology and emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're not going to say my IL-6 is high and my LDL is 147.
No. However, from an AI perspective, to get a really good health analysis, if you've got the TCM perspective, you've got blood lab perspective from functional medicine. I mean, like the more inputs you have, the better the overall picture of working out what's going on with your health.
Is there published research on infoceuticals?
Yes, we just had a paper published by UCSD, and that was looking at, basically we took our wearable and we put it next to these rat cardiac cells, and then tested all the different effects. And what we found is a number of things. Like, one, we could increase the mitochondrial density by 50%.
50% from an infoceutical? Is this Dr. Hemal Patel?
Yeah.
Oh, he's been on the show. He's the guy who does the me-screen mitochondrial test that I've been dreaming about forever. And I've actually been to his lab. So he's very legit as a researcher. What did he say? Was he kind of like blown away, or was he saying, yeah, we see this all the time?
So I met him 3.5, 4 years ago, and I met him at a Joe Dispenza event.
Me too.
And I had lunch with him there, and obviously in that conversation, well, he'd just been on stage explaining about how he was reducing COVID viral penetration into lung tissue, and I just said to him, "Look, you can do that through an infoceutical," and he was questioning and skeptical, but he said just send the infoceuticals off to his lab. It took him around 4 months to get round to it because, I think I was just probably an annoying fly in his world, but I kept annoying him until he actually
he's kind of a big deal at UCSD.
Yeah.
His lab is legit. It's very big.
But anyway, he eventually did it, and he came back to me, he rang me up and said, "Harry, you're right. Actually, it beat the meditation effect by a few percent." So that was good. And because if that hadn't happened, he wouldn't have carried on. But because it did, then I was basically able to set up a whole research program, and we have like a full-time post-grad employed that just basically does experiments on a continual basis there.
Using the digital product.
We've actually done both. We did the liquid infoceutics and the digital, but the results are the same, because the liquid, in the end, you're imprinting a liquid. With a tissue culture, you're imprinting the medium that the tissue culture is living on, so that the effect is the same.
Is this
that's the wearable.
And what's it called?
Oh, the GEM, that stands for Guided Energy Management.
So this is the GEM. How come you haven't given me one?
I've got one backstage for you.
All right. And it's e4l.com/Dave.
Yes.
People can, and what do they cost?
They cost $400, but there's a 10% discount if you add the code Dave.
e4l.com/Dave. So that puts it down at about $360.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have to pay monthly?
You've got a choice. So it will do all the detect side, and you can also manually correct yourself, and that's just included in the price. If you want to do it in a subscription where it's basically looking at every single hour, it's correcting everything to your personal pulse, then that's a subscription.
Do you have clinical trials or observational data you've collected from people? Like, what kind of results are you seeing from it?
So there's a couple of things. So the paper I was just describing, so it has a whole bunch of things, but it'll increase the efficiency of energy in the cell by 22%.
As measured by mitochondria?
They basically measured the amount of energy output with the amount of sugar that they were feeding it.
Oh, okay. So that's mitochondrial efficiency.
Yeah.
Holy crap. So in Headstrong, my book about mitochondria in the brain, I talked about Frank Schallenberger's work on mitochondrial efficiency and how 48% of people under age 40 have inefficient mitochondria, and everyone over age 40 has it. We just call it aging. And yet a 22% shift in efficiency of converting sugar into electricity or heat just by wearing the GEM?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm actually going to wear this for a while.
Yeah, no, you should.
Does it do sleep tracking too? Because I don't really like wearing the Whoop.
It does all the normal stuff like HRV, movements, sleep tracking. But that's not the magical part. The magical part is how.
But if I don't have to wear an Oura ring, so this does everything that an Oura ring does?
Yes.
Oh, and that's
now Oura Ring is an $11 billion company, and we're a relatively modest company. So potentially their sleep algorithm will be a little bit better for maybe 6 months, but we will be there.
Okay. That's kind of cool. So if you're willing to wear a wristband, then you get the sleep in steps for whatever that's worth. And then you're getting an actual signal into the body. This is really intriguing.
Well, the cool part is it'll give you awareness of your emotions. So, we talked about aging, but the biggest factor of reduction in lifespan, the ACE studies, the adverse childhood event studies.
Course, yeah.
So when you've had more than 3 adverse childhood events, or very significant ones like I had, like you had,
for sure,
on average, there's a 20-year reduction in lifespan. And honestly, that's one of the biggest energy leaks of the body that most people don't talk about. Like, we all talk about toxicity and lifestyle, but we don't really talk about trauma. So actually having awareness of your emotions and a path, I'm not going to use your word, I'm going to use the word transformation, but when you have a path to transform your negative to positive emotions, that obviously has a massive impact on reducing the amount of energy leakage from your body. And when you've got much more energy available, actually that has a direct correlation to extended lifespan.
The effect of trauma is such a big deal. That's why I heavily meditated. I think it's my most important book that just came out. It's why 40 Years of Zen has been around for 10 years, because I had to do a lot of that deep work. And the first step is awareness. And just knowing what's going on in there, you don't have a signal, it's disconnected for a lot of people, even if they didn't have a lot of trauma as children. So if the GEM is helping people go, oh, if the state that you're reading digitally is this, then you can correlate that to your felt state and you can do something about it. So for me, practices like this, oftentimes with digital technology, sometimes with therapists, allowed me to have a really detailed set of instrumentation about my emotional and physical state, which is what lets me do half the stuff I can do. So this is
well, then when you meditate, you actually have that awareness of what happened in the last 24 hours, and you can think, well, why was I anxious? Why was I impatient? Why was I frustrated? And then you can think about, well, I should be more joyful, more gentle, more abundant, or whatever the state should be.
Okay. And guys, if you're thinking this is kind of interesting, it's E4L, just E4L.com/Dave. And you get 10% off when you do that. I think this is worth your attention, especially if you don't already have a sleep tracker or a fitness tracker. This is, well, about what you'd pay for one of those anyway. And it kind of does a few other things.
Even if you do, you should replace it with this.
Oh, well, there we go. All right. Straight from the founder's mouth.
Yeah, I know. Totally credible.
He has absolutely no bias. So that's pretty cool. All right. So you've increased mitochondrial efficiency. And
the other exciting part about the research is Professor Hamel is able to look at all the RNA transcriptase factors, and he noticed 1,124 different gene expressions, and they cover all sorts of different things, but increased antioxidant capacity, obviously increased mitochondrial efficiency, increased cell resilience.
So the GEM is turning on or off more than 1,000 genes?
Correct. Yeah.
What's inside that thing? Is it lights, electricity, fairy seahorses, or what's going on?
I mean, the fairy seahorse is what we said at the beginning, which is basically the information that's carried on the field. And you can carry information using light, you can carry it using sound, you can carry it using PMF. In this case, it's carrying it with light and PMF. But in the end, the information is digital, it's binary, but we're putting a binary signal into the body.
So is it laser or LED?
It's LED, and that doesn't matter.
Okay. Now, some people would say carrying information. I'm a former network engineer. I taught about 1,500 engineers in Silicon Valley how to build networks in Web 1.0. And going from everything from the signaling layer all the way up to how we carry data. And this is how I see the world. Inside the body, we have incredibly beautiful signaling networks, but not just one. And we can communicate with chemicals, which are slow. We can communicate with movement or vibration. We communicate with light. We communicate with magnetism. And we communicate with quantum entanglement and maybe information fields, which could be similar to quantum. We're not quite sure yet. Each of those networks has different speeds and different uses. And each of those networks can be intercepted and hacked because I was also a computer hacker. And all we're talking about here is in computing what we call a data injection attack, except it's for your own good, not for bad things. So we're going in there and saying there's faulty information flow on this signaling network. So let's use a network that's accessible, and PEMF and light are accessible. So when those are accessible and we know how they use light or magnetism to send a signal, we just replicate the signal and we send the signal we want into the network, and then the body responds. This is the same way that I would take over your mobile phone and steal your crypto if that was what I was into. It's exactly the same thing. Am I right?
Yes, but we're not going to steal any energy from your body by doing it.
So if the body's hackable like this, how did you reverse engineer the signaling system in the body?
So that was the work of Peter Fraser, and that was the work of Professor Peter Fraser. He was part of Melbourne University, and I met him 24 years ago. And he actually did it all through trial and error, but there's many, many different examples. But I'll just take the example of what we call cell driver. So he would look at all the different pathways in the cell that generate energy. He'd also look at how heat and infrared would basically pass into H3O2, the structured water in the cells, spin out an electron, how that electron then ends up going to the cell membrane. But, he was looking at conventional pathways, but also energetic pathways. You map out the full sequence of information, and then we basically convert that to binary. And that's a little bit of a trade secret, so I probably won't tell you how we convert it to binary.
You don't have to share that. I don't need to know. But the idea that someone studied this for a long time who did it. And this doesn't pass the sniff test because we all have a picture of how things work, and we're taught this from childhood. Like, we're taught how history worked. By the way, that story is entirely nonsense. When they teach you in history classes, it does not reflect what actually happened because there's many, many, many data points that don't match, but then they can't see them or they explain them away.
Well, can I destroy the conventional view for you?
Sure, let's do it.
So let's just look at chemistry. Let's say we're traditionally taught, and we believe the whole body works off chemistry.
Just chemistry, right?
So, we eat a supplement or we take a drug, we digest it, the liver processes it, the chemical goes around the blood, gets to a cell. How long did that take?
It depends on the drug, but
like minutes to hours.
Yeah.
Yet we've got 70 trillion cells in our body. Every cell has 3 trillion operations that are happening every single second. Mm-hmm. So, that's trillions times trillions of magnitude of complexity. The only way the body can stay alive is if you've also got a field-based system. Like, you need a far quicker communication system than just chemistry. Or you could take the nervous system, that's another example of a control system. Yet all the nerve fibers are completely different widths. They all travel at completely different speeds. If you just take an example of a baseball player, who accurately hits the ball at 120 miles per hour, and he hits the bat, and it's sort of like magic how he does it, but it can't be explained by a normal nervous system model. And the reason is because there's information being carried on the field outside the nervous system. The nervous system is more like it sets up the field, but information is carried over the top of it. Now, actually, when you're looking at the body or fields in the body, there's somnoluminescence effects, there's biophotons, which are obviously very, very fast, and there's also say the information carried by the field, and in totality that's what we would call the body field. But without that, we literally wouldn't be able to be alive, and just chemistry alone doesn't work.
You can also just blow holes in the chemical model really easily. It's called the placebo effect. If the placebo effect exists, then we're not running on just chemistry.
Well, what's the placebo effect? Like, even that's a field-based effect. It is
a field-based effect.
Yep.
But in the people who insist that we're only chemical beings, like little meat robots, so we have to beat the placebo effect. And then what you're just discounting that as not being something worth studying or amplifying. So
I know, don't you think if medicine had just studied the placebo effect, we'd be a lot further?
Well,
that's saying how the body works. or how you heal.
And medicine did study that. If we go way back in time to the Enlightenment, the early Natural Philosopher Society, which was where science came from, they knew electricity at least was part of the system, and that chemistry was part of the system, and these other field effects were there. Tesla was working on that. Rilla Rife was working on that. And then someone figured out you could make pharmaceuticals out of petroleum, and happened to be named Rockefeller. And he's been at war with any medicine that is not petroleum-based to make us see the world in that model. But there's another study that shows every time your heart beats, that the proton spin in every cell in the brain reverses direction, which means that there's quantum entanglement inside the body. So we have proof we're quantum systems. Our microtubules are quantum. So all these things are simultaneously true. We are chemical beings. You don't believe me? Eat cyanide. Well, you don't believe me after that either, because you're chemical, right? At the same time, sit in an electric chair. Well, you don't believe me after that either, because we're electrical. And we can also cook you with magnetism and all these other things. We can end life with these things. So that means that they're controlling life at some level.
You know what I think is a bit funny about medicine is they're very aware of these systems. Like, you have an MRI system, right. You have an EKG and EEG, yet they think all these fields don't do something. They're just sort of, I don't know, like this noise or something that you can read, but it doesn't have an effect on the body.
It kind of makes me laugh. And when people come into Upgrade Labs, we have very powerful light-based systems and magnetism-based systems and manipulating oxygen, which is technically a chemical-based system, and temperature. All these things, they're all just variables in the world, but you got to look at the totality of them. And what's impressive about what you're doing is you're taking these ancient practices and you're applying rigorous scientific method to them to figure out what works and what doesn't. And that's what biohacking is all about. Like, let's use what we already know and let's prove whether it works or it doesn't work, and let's maybe accelerate it. Because I'm pretty sure back in China, they'd have been sticking needles in you and giving you, eye of newt and bat wing. And I'm sure you've been to a traditional Chinese herbal store. It's remarkable. Like, they're getting these jars of God knows what out and putting them in newspaper and telling you to boil it. But it works. And if you can do this with a digital thing, I think that's remarkable. And it's very expensive to have, an 80-year-old Chinese guy walk around with you every 2 hours measuring your pulse points and then telling you what to do. In fact, it's impossible. So,
well, and giving you acupuncture treatments every 2 hours too.
Yeah, that would be fun. It's just like a pin cushion. So this is a continuation, though, of a very long lineage, and it's particularly cool. This pisses off rationalists, and it's fun to be a rationalist and an irrationalist at the same time. But my friend Mark Lemley, who ran the IP practice at Stanford University, I met him in a yoga class. And he published a paper years ago about the myth of the lone inventor. And in this paper, he showed that for all of the big transformative ideas in society, there were always at least 3 people simultaneously working on it. One of them got to the patent office first, but there was always at least 2 more days or months behind that were also creating the same thing without talking to each other. So when it's time for an idea, the idea is going to come through, and no one knows why that happens.
I mean, actually, I've seen it with this wearable. Like, there's another wearable out there that does the correction side, but they don't have the research behind it, and they didn't really map out the information. They don't have the pulse bar, but it's happened at the same time. I'm a little bit later, but that's because I've been working on it longer and better.
There you go. And just in the world of biohacking, it's now a $36 billion industry. And it was a new idea that's so related to this. It was, let's measure and then change. And before that, let's just kind of measure and then maybe do something. But the real time measuring and changing, that's what biofeedback and neurofeedback are based on. And a lot of the biohacking innovations are around sending a signal in from all these environmental variables. In fact, the definition of biohacking, it's change the environment inside you or the environment around you so that you have full control of your biology, of your state. So that means you're sending a signal. I don't care if it's sunshine or if it's a gem or if it's jumping up and down on a trampoline. It doesn't matter. It's a signal. And if you know the right signal and you know the state of the body, you can change the state of the body or of the mind. It actually just makes sense, right? The problem has been knowing the right signal, and AI is getting better and better. And when you get some lab work in there, we're doing a lot of lab work within Upgrade Labs right now. And then when you start getting bioenergetic readings and you're doing this very ancient stuff that you're doing in GEM and you're combining those things, it seems like a really powerful thing. So I'm going to wear one for a while, and I'm expecting to be like 6 inches taller. What else should I say?
You're going to be more aware emotionally. You'll basically manage your energy better, sleep better, and have more balanced emotions. Well, those are the claims we're making. In reality, God, what can I say on the podcast? I mean, there's all the health stuff, but I probably can't make the claim.
One of the fun things in the US is that you're actually not allowed to speak the truth if you're doing health stuff. So every supplement manufacturer out there, every device manufacturer out there says the dumbest things, right? And we all say that because we're not allowed to say what it does, because legally only drugs can do that.
I think you can interpret what our GEM does from the research that Professor Hemmel has done, and there's a very likely to be a strong correlation between that research and what happens in the body.
There we go. That sounds good. So I unfortunately haven't tried the GEM, but I have tried the tech that it's based on just from knowing you for 10 years and working with it. So I know there's some efficacy there. The other thing was pretty bulky and have to carry it around in your pocket and all. So I'm excited, really excited to try the GEM. And guys, it's e4l.com/Dave, and very affordable. Thank you for coming on the show and just for innovating on this. And knowing you for a long time, you and I both have been through an unimaginable amount of suffering. And people who haven't had chronic fatigue and just been like, I'm a highly functional human being, and no matter how much willpower I apply, like my body will not move out of bed. I just don't have it today. It doesn't matter how much you want or push or try. It's just empty. And you've been there. And I am absolutely certain, like, I'm not going back. And I'm not going back for any reason, right? And I monitor all the systems, and it's just something, I don't want anyone else to ever go there. And I know you run on that same thing. Like, it's not worth it to go there, and we don't have to go there. And it's expensive and difficult to get out of it. So preventing it is a lot easier. A lot of people today are running at 50% of what they could run at, and they think they're fine. A lot of people are at 40%, and they know something's vaguely wrong, but whatever, I got shit to do. And if you can do something that's relatively inexpensive and relatively easy, that brings you back up to 60, 70, 80%, the difference is profound, because people are nicer to each other when we don't feel like crap all the time. Like, it makes the world better when people have more energy. So this is important work you're doing, and thank you.
No, thank you.
Guys, e4l.com/Dave. This is real.
See you next time on the Human Upgrade Podcast.